Hi, everyone. We're going to give folks a few minutes to continue to join in. It looks like folks are getting their audios set up. We'll ask you to keep your phones or computers on mute, please, or maybe we've done that for you. Um, and uh, and we are super excited to have you participate in this conversation. But we will give folks a few minutes to log in. Great. It looks like we have some more folks joining. So we'll give it maybe 2 more minutes to give folks a minute to connect, to travel, and then we'll get started. All righty, let's do it. Hello, everyone. Super excited to see each of you. For those that I can see on camera, of course. My name is Chantel Lewis. I am the VP of Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity here at the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless, and I welcome you to our Revealing Racism, Inequality in Housing, Healthcare, and Employment. I am super excited for the panelists that we have and their presentations this evening. I will actually turn it over to the panelists for them to introduce themselves. And so we will go ahead and start with Jonathan. Jonathan, if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. My name is Jonathan Capelli, and I'm the director of the Neighborhood Development Collaborative, which is a coalition of 17 nonprofit housing organizations across Metro Denver, kind of ranging all along the spectrum. CCH is a member, so homelessness, and then also all the way up to home ownership with organizations like Habitat for Humanity, et cetera.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Really appreciate it. Excited to have you this evening. Caitlin, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself to the folks on the call today.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Caitlin Altone. I'm a paid leave organizer at 9 to 5 Colorado. We're an economic justice organization that works through a lens of gender and racial justice. Our main buckets of work are paid family and medical leave and housing rights. So yeah, happy to be here.
We are super excited to have you. Thank you so much, Caitlin. And Thomas, if you don't mind taking a few moments to introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Thomas Allen. I am the data manager for the Honoring Fatherhood program at the Denver Indian Center. The Denver Indian Center has been around since 1984. We are kind of the hub for the Native American community in the Denver metro area. We do have services for the community and outreach that we are doing currently amid the COVID-19 pandemic. And, you know, we are out there collaborating with other great organizations such as the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless, the Native American Housing Circle, and other organizations out there, you know, committed to our community.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And last but certainly not least, Carla, if you can take a moment to introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Carla Respects Nothing. I am a peer navigator at the Denver Public Library. I'm also on the board of directors of Metro Denver Housing Initiative. I'm part of the Native American Housing Circle, and just out here to collaborate with everyone in regards to outreaching, homelessness, and just trying to figure out a way in addictions to get everyone connected.
Thank you so much, Carla. Well, I am super excited to have these panelists this evening. Sounds like I'm still in the afternoon this evening. We are going to kick it off with Thomas and Carla, who are going to who are going to be our first presenters. And so if you all would like to kick it off and get started, we'd love to hear from you.
Sure. Well, me and Carla, we met last night and we kind of went over, you know, some of the response questions, and we thought to ourselves, you know, how best to illustrate, you know, what we're doing, some of our passion, and, you know, some of the things that we come up against and barriers, you know, with our community. And we, as a traditional people, are very verbal people. And I'd just like to emphasize that, you know, some of the outreach that Carla and I are doing involve, you know, having that traditional sense of our community, and knowing that, you know, our trust in government systems is not, you know, really the highest. And we understand that within our own community, being Native American, and knowing that we need to be out there for our community. Some of our community was unaware of the pandemic and was kind of taken aback of, you know, not being able to get, you know, basic things such as food. Some of the people that were housed, you know, and, you know, just some of the barriers that we're facing out there. Not only that, you know, with the funding that, you know, our respective organizations sometimes rely on and need for, you know, that outreach, not only that for staffing and logistics, and then now with, you know, the new things that are coming up, you know, sanitization, testing, partitions and things like that to be socially distant. You know, these are some of the things that, you know, we all at the Indian Center, at the library, and other places who have, you know, come together to collaborate during this time. Carla and I, we go out and we do outreach specifically to our community to let them know that, hey, the Denver Indian Center is here. We are trying to serve our community the best we can with limited resources, and also, you know, just also us trying to be safe with masks, you know, and handing out hand sanitizer as best we can. But you know, these are innovative and big problems that our community is facing, and it's not our first pandemic. That is some of the things that that we like to say, and, you know, just deal with the task at hand and be innovative in our field, and just spread knowledge of our community. And first and foremost, that, you know, we are here every day. We're here among, you know, everybody out there. You know, we have a lot of people in our Denver metro area And, we like to emphasize that, that everyday interaction that, you're going to come across a Native American, and, that we are out here, and that we are, different Indians, as the executive director likes to say, we come from different, backgrounds, different economic structures, and we all try to make a way in Colorado, and whatever that looks like. But also, we have a traditional background also, and that is a big part of, what it is to be Native American. We fought hard to keep that traditional aesthetic, to keep these things, to us. And, that's an important part of what it means to be Indian, or Native American, or whatever indigenous people like to go by. Carla, could you elaborate on some of the things, I was talking about?
Sure. We take a pride in honor and understanding of our culture. Living in two worlds, we also, a lot of us come from reservations, our homelands, and we still carry those cultures and traditions here with us in an urban setting. And so we're still used to practicing prayer and what we call smudging every day. We smudge with sage, cedar, sweetgrass. So it's hard for us to have a good mental and behavioral health wellness, because we're used to this type of practice every day. And we also, it's good cleansing and purification of our mind, heart, and body. And so during COVID, when everything got locked down, a lot of the traditions and cultures really ended. And, there was no way we could go to a sweat lodge, which is purification. And so it was, everything stopped. And I'm sure for everyone here as well, we all have our own little self practices of prayer and, just kind of yoga, whatever it was we did to, to get ourselves and our minds right, dealing with what we're reading on social media as well. So a lot of that in our traditional culture, ended, and we couldn't, especially with our elders, because they were especially put on lockdown. So a lot of the interaction and connectedness of being together, and even to pray, it ended. So it was pretty hard on us for once we all got, we had to be inside, which is happening again. But yeah, that's kind of what is the hard part. And I'm grateful that I'm at the library, because even though the libraries got shut down, we went above and beyond and stepped outside and still did outreach to connect to the people that we know that were out there homeless and stuck in addictions, to just to see how they're doing. And in a library setting, we also have our customers, our favorite customers who we checked on, who that was in the process of getting housing or in the process of getting treatment, that we could still go out there and connect with them and look for them as well, and see it and try to get them into a shelter or something. But yeah, that's really kind of where I was at. I'm going with that one.
Thank you so much. Oh, go ahead, Jonathan. Or go ahead, Thomas. I'm sorry.
Oh, I would just like to, add, we're doing as much as we can with all the organizations. We all collaborated. We had a meeting earlier today with the state, the Colorado Commission of Indian Affairs. We've all collaborated on some level to share resources, small organizations to big organizations such as Denver Indian Center, DIFRAC, DFIS, some of the organizations that do the testing out there, so we could collaborate and have this communication out here and let people know that, we are out here, we're here trying to help as many people, as much as we can, and then also just the traditional factor, most of our organizations have this, and we want to keep that aesthetic and let people know it's not much. You know, we have a couple of masks that we do hang. We go out, but we just like to, you know, show our community that we're there, while also doing, you know, the administrative work, also doing, you know, looking after funding and seeing how logistically we can collaborate with the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless. You know, different organizations out there who are willing to help, who are doing, you know, the groundwork also. So again, thank you, you know, just for inviting us and, you know, gathering our input and giving us a voice for our community.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Thank you so much, Carla. I'm going to kick it off to Caitlin so she can give her presentation, but we do have some questions for you all in the chat, and so we'll get to those after Jonathan's presentation. Go ahead, Caitlin.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that's all right. I have a presentation. I would like to show you a few slides. So I'm going to share my screen. Give me just 1 second. Great. Yeah, so like I said, 9 to 5 Colorado, we're an economic justice organization, and we work to create change through issue-based advocacy, grassroots organizing, and community education. And we work with women and other community members who are most impacted by unjust economic policies to better organize for improved work and living conditions. So our vision is that all women and their families can live and thrive in an economically and racially just world. And this is just so important because it's women of color who are most impacted by unfair labor practices, poor working conditions, low wages, and of course, really any other economic justice issue that you can think of. So yeah, so like I said, our main buckets of work are paid family and medical leave, as well as housing rights. Just a little info on just worker justice. But you know, of course, there's really deep inequities in our workforce, and it's all designed to work against BIPOC folks, you know, keep the poor poor and make the rich richer. And it's built into our laws, it's built into our policies, as well as our workplace cultures. So, you know, on the slide here, I have some pretty depressing facts, like the wage gap, that while it's a gendered wage gap, it's a racial wage gap. Most low-wage workers don't have access to paid sick days. Most workers in general don't have access to paid family and medical leave. 2/3 of workers who earn minimum wage or less are women. And women of color represent almost half of the low-wage workforce. And then this one at the bottom, that average white households has about $140,000 in wealth, while the average Black household has $3,400, and that is just a staggering disparity. So, you know, it's really BIPOC folks, especially women of color, who are bearing this burden. And this just impacts far and wide to their families, their housing security, and this has generational impacts. So at 9 to 5, we approach economic justice through a gender and racial lens. And we really rely on the lived experiences of those who are most impacted and work to lift those up when we're pushing for policy change. So now I'm just going to share some of the things that we have been working on, and also some things to look to in the future. So paid family and medical leave, Proposition 118, which you've already voted. I hope you voted yes on. If you have yet to vote, please vote yes. But why we've worked on this for so long and so hard is because 80% of Colorado workers don't have access to a comprehensive paid family and medical leave. But this problem disproportionately impacts low-wage workers, especially Black and Brown women, who have the least access to paid family and medical leave. It's only 43% of Black workers who report having any access to paid parental leave. That's even lower for Latinx workers at 25%. And paid family and medical leave, we believe, is really vital for BIPOC communities, particularly women, because they tend to have significant caregiving responsibilities. And when workers don't have access to this benefit, then they're making really hard choices between their health, their family, and then their paycheck. And this can push workers out of the workforce, potentially multiple times over a lifetime. And then they're essentially having to start over each time, which is significant loss in income. So Prop 118, the details of this program were specifically designed to address the inequities that we see from lack of access to paid leave. So, from the length of leave that's provided to the wage replacement, who qualifies for it. All those factors were put in place with the knowledge that this is how we're going to ensure that our most vulnerable folks are the ones who can use this program meaningfully. And then paid sick days. So this is a recent win from this last legislative session. This is so important because access to paid sick days is highly related to the wages that people are making. Lower paid workers have significantly less access. It also closely follows the industry that folks work in. So when workers don't have this benefit, they're having to choose between their paycheck, showing up sick, putting off doctor's visits. And this really, hurts workers and their families. But happy to say that this is going into effect January 1st, 2021. Equal pay for equal work. So, this is a huge problem that women face, and, we see it along gender lines, but it's, especially bad along racial lines. So because of the wage gap, women of color just have a giant loss of income over their lifetime. So the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act, it's a step in the right direction for working on this problem, because frequent practices like, offering someone a salary based on their salary history, or not allowing workers to discuss their wages and their salaries, has perpetuated this issue. So this is going into effect this January as well. And then this last issue that I wanted to talk about with all of you, worker misclassification and protection carve outs. This has been an ongoing issue, but we also expect to see this to continue to come up. So misclassification, it happens when workers who meet the requirements of a traditional employee are instead classified as independent contractors. And independent contractors don't have a lot of the same workplace rights and protections as regular employees. But in Colorado, it's about 10% of workers who are independent contractors. So they don't have those protections, but it's probably like tens of thousands of workers who are misclassified every year. So, you know, we see this is a big issue for like app-based jobs that we see more commonly now. But it's not just drivers, you know, it's also like construction, janitorial work. It can intersect in a lot of fields if management companies are hiring contract workers and then misclassifying them. So in California, app-based companies pushed back to a court ruling that was in favor of workers by backing a ballot measure. And they put millions of dollars behind this because they're willing to do this at the expense of workers so that they can still keep profiting. So yeah, that's what I wanted to share with you. But yeah, you know, definitely, you know, we have some progress under our belts, but there's a lot that we still need to address. And, you know, we believe it's vital to just keep framing our policy work from a racial justice lens.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. I appreciate the work you all are doing. Jonathan, I will turn it over to you for our final presentation, and then we can get into some audience Q&A. So it looks like, oh, there you go.
Hi, sounds good. Just give me 1 second to share my screen and close my 1,000 tabs. Let's see. Okay, oops, start at the bottom. Sorry if that caused any eye issues just now for people. Okay, can everyone see this?
Yes.
Great. So going to talk a little bit about how we've sort of been thinking about this from an affordable housing perspective over the last year. And kind of the some of the data and the strategies that we've been exploring around specifically racial justice and housing in the context of the Black Lives Matters movement, et cetera. So what is the connection? So what I'll try to sort of examine here is, as quickly as possible, is, you know, why is the current justice movement, reform movement relevant to housing, and what can we do from a housing perspective to support the BLM movement? So first, I think it's important to talk a little bit about the context of how we got here in terms of inequality, which shows up in the criminal justice system as well. So first off, way back when there was the Homestead Act, this happened back in the 1800s. It awarded lots of acres to 1.6 million homesteaders. Those folks were the ancestors of about 20% of today's white families, but that excluded Black families. There was a GI Bill, which helped establish the post-World War II white middle class, but a lot of Black people and brown people were excluded from a lot of the benefits of that, which included cheap loans, et cetera. Redlining, folks are probably familiar with that term, preventing folks, Black families, from purchasing homes in or near white neighborhoods or in new suburbs. Brown people as well. Was a general category of undesirables, in quotes, that were discriminated against there. Then there was a Great Recession. Latino and African American borrowers were significantly more likely to get subprime loans. Altogether, 56% of foreclosures during the Great Recession happened to Black and brown households. And what we've seen across the city is that those neighborhoods that had a high concentration of Black and brown households had really high rates of foreclosures. And when investors bought those properties and went back in and redeveloped them, that's kind of the pattern of gentrification that we're seeing as well. And then of course, throughout, there's been NIMBYism right now in my backyard, strategies where wealthier neighborhoods can keep multifamily and low-income folks out of their neighborhoods. So just looking at how that showed up in Denver, this is a redlining map, which again, many of you are probably familiar with. Red stands for areas where we're advised not to invest or underwrite. And yellow was also unfavorable, blue is okay, green is good. And if you look at this map and overlay it with current demographic layers, you can really see how this map had forebode or foretold a lot of the issues that we currently see across Denver. Here's some fun little quotes from the underwriting manual of 1938, keeping out lower class people and inharmonious racial groups. You should check to see if there's, quote, incompatible racial and social groups present. If you want to retain your stability, you got to make sure it's occupied by the same racial classes. If you have folks living in a favorable area, but their kids will end up being in a low-income school district, well, you should probably pay a fee so that your kids can go to a different school with their appropriate class, right? This was codified in our laws. When you layer it over current maps of Denver, this is housing stability today. Again, red, hazardous, yellow, declining, blue, desirable, and green, best. These are the old maps. This was relevant until the Fair Housing Act around 1968. So light areas are areas in Denver with really low housing stability, and dark areas have high stability. And so you can kind of see the red and the yellow outlines that correspond pretty closely to the areas of least housing stability across the city on the west side and north side, et cetera. When you get into things like economic security, similar patterns, the ones where where that pattern doesn't fit, like here, are places that have had radical demographic changes since then and no longer are occupied by primarily Black and brown people. Education quality have some pretty good overlap, so there's a lot of improvements on the east side, but still on the west and north side, you see low education corresponds strongly with places that were deemed hazardous for investment back in the day, primarily because of race. And health has some similar overlaps as well for folks in the lower health percentile and higher health percentile. So how does it affect the path to homeownership today? Right now, Black homeownership in Colorado is 37%. 37% of Black households are homeowners. It's 70% for white families. 3% of folks getting mortgages essentially are Black in Colorado. 4% of Colorado households are Black. So there's a little disconnect there. At this rate, that gap is never really going to close. Can you guys see my mouse if I scroll around? Okay, it's like, I use like a laser pointer. This one is national rates, so this does not quite correspond to the Colorado numbers, but you can sort of see nationally the homeownership rate being very disparate between these groups. Mortgage denial rates have been falling, as you can see by that map there, or the chart there, but it's still high for Black families at 17.4% compared to 7.9%. So this is corresponded to an increasing wealth gap over time. You can see starting in 1963 all the way to present, there's been a slowly increasing income for folks, so not really if you adjust for inflation. But today you have white families have 7 times the wealth of Black families and 5 times the wealth of Hispanic families or Latino families. So median income is really, for both Black and Latinx households, are really low. The homeownership rate is low, you just described. Net worth ends up being significantly different as a result. And so Black and brown families are disproportionately low income, renters rather than homeowners, concentrated in low income neighborhoods. I want to stress that housing isn't the only explanation for this, but it's a pretty big part of it. So, and that's the lens we're looking through today for this. So how does this connect to Black Lives Matters movement in particular? Well, boys who grew up in families in the bottom 10% of the income distribution across the country are 20 times more likely to be in prison on any given day. If you are a higher income household, then it's extremely unlikely that your kids will ever end up in prison. And of course, it's not just that kids are acting out, right? I think it's pretty clear that I'm pretty sure kids in Pitkin County consume more cocaine per capita than folks in, I don't know, name your neighborhood in Denver, but they don't get policed, right? And they don't go to jail for it. Pre-incarceration incomes of current US prisoners are also really disparate. You've got 86% of current prisoners had incomes of $15,000 or less before incarceration, and about half of them were unemployed. I've sort of, in other presentations, just asked what people thought, and most people guessed, much higher than that. But essentially, most people that are in prison were in poverty before that. Doing a little cascade, we talked about the housing and wealth gap that leads to this poverty, in part because it's really difficult to build intergenerational wealth without this access to property. And then part of that leads to incarceration rates or police interactions. In Colorado, it's 4% of the population, Black people are 4% of the population, but 14% of arrests, 3 times the rate of what you'd expect if you just treated everyone equally based on the percentage of the population that Black people constitute. So how do these criminal justice practices impact our ability to provide affordable housing opportunities? What's the connection? Well, there's a huge amount of dollars that are spent on the pretty backwards criminal justice system that creates this permanent underclass of folks who can't get good jobs or find a good place to live. These monies are going to fund these practices instead of human services, housing, economic programs, et cetera. And as a result, there's no money to lift anyone up or provide opportunities for them to lift themselves up. And then, as we showed earlier, those households or those families disproportionately end up getting kids that end up in jail or having interactions with the police, which can often be fatal. What kind of crime are we talking about when we're talking about crime? I think a lot of people think that what the police do is, it's all law and order and serial killers and, running people down. But, in reality, there's a lot of what they do, are crimes of poverty or addiction that they're policing. Nonviolent property theft is by far the largest category of crime in Colorado. Let's see, total violent crime is less than 10%. If you look at murder or homicides, it's 0.09% of all crime in Colorado. So according to the Department of Justice, 40% of all thefts are tied to substance misuse, and 30% of all felony filings were also substance use related in Colorado. We have 4% of the population, 20% of the world prison population. We spend $1 billion per year on prisons, huge increase since the 90s. If you look at the numbers today, more people have been housed in Colorado's prisons than have ever been sheltered in Colorado's affordable housing programs. If we were a country, our incarceration rate, Colorado's incarceration rate would be the same as El Salvador. As far as budgets go, a lot of cities spend 30% or more on police and corrections. So this is Aurora's budget, which obviously, was in the news a lot for really bad reasons over the last year. 32% of their budget goes to police. In Denver, the public safety budget at $435 million is more than twice that of human services. I'm going to misquote this, but I believe it was something like $14 million since 2016 were spent on settling suits with police misconduct, in the city. So, more than half of the affordable housing budget spent settling disputes for bad cops. So we have really poor police training here too, right? It takes way longer, 3 times as long to become a hairdresser than it does to become a police officer. And we spend very little time on de-escalation tactics or anything sane. Recidivism is extremely high here, 50% recidivism rate. And most of the increase in crime, according to CPR over the last few years, was tied to reoffenders and not to new criminals, so to speak. And then if you look at public safety, we only spend $30 million a year as a state on affordable housing, 3% of what we spend on incarceration. Let's see, make sure I'm still on time. Do I still have time? Anyone?
One more minute. One more minute.
All right, I can do this. There are other ways to go about this. When the Housing First model was applied in Oregon, there was a 91% reduction in crime among those that they housed. Mental health programs such as the CAHOOTS program in Oregon got rid of 20% of 911 calls and transferred them to medics and crisis workers. It's a quarter of all police shootings happen to folks who are having a mental health crisis at the time. Denver is piloting a similar program. It's CCH, Coalition for the Homeless, as well as Mental Health Center of Denver, and their program so far, which is pretty new, but it has had a 70% success rate in terms of keeping crises out of the hands of police. Let's see. And then there's housing and reentry programs. Aurora Second Chance Center has reduced the recidivism rate in Colorado, or amongst those that they've housed, to 8% from that 50%, right? And the Colorado Criminal Justice Reform Coalition had a bill out that took money from the bloated corrections budget and invested them in communities in Aurora and in Colorado Springs that had really high crime rates. Unfortunately, the funding was cut for that in part because of the current crisis we're in. Though, of course, not all programs were cut. So in summary, what are the best ways that we've been looking at to sort of address this and improve racial equity from a housing perspective and just in general? One is balance these public investments, so decrease the funding of non-human services mental health programs in the police as a percentage of state and city budgets, eliminate the racial wealth gap by investing in home ownership opportunities, and then finally integrate housing, fight the NIMBYism and all the things that are keeping our communities looking as segregated as they did in some cases, back in the 60s, with the exception of, sort of higher income white people moving in through gentrification, but there's no reverse mobility out of those neighborhoods, right? Hopefully I didn't go too far over, but that's how we've been thinking about it from a housing perspective, and I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. You all did a wonderful job. Thank you, Carla. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Thomas. And thank you, Caitlin. I will actually, I'll start one question, but I do want to spend the majority of our time taking questions from the folks who have given their evening to attend this presentation. But Jonathan, you touched on the protest in Denver and also the protest, not just in Denver, the social justice movement outside of our city. And one of the questions that I have for each of you, and I'd love for you all to touch on this, is folks have categorized or described both the global pandemic and racism as twin pandemics or dueling pandemics, depending on who you ask. And so I'm curious as how that has changed the work that you all have done, or if it has changed the work that you all have been doing, and if it's changed the work that you all continue to do in the future. And so I'll just open that up to the panelists because I'm curious. Don't all jump at once.
Go ahead. Okay, well, I'll just briefly say that it's really rooted us in the origins of our work. One of the last things that Martin Luther King did before he was assassinated was fight for the Fair Housing Act, right, in Chicago, and fight that sort of discrimination. In many ways, I think, to our shame, a lot of the affordable housing world has drifted away from not exclusively, but really centering racial justice in our work per its origins. We often use code instead. you should pass this bill because, Senator, because it's going to have great economic, benefits, et cetera. You can house your workforce, et cetera, and never mention race, right? Not everyone does that, but I think that this has really made us realize that that's crap, that we need to be much more vocal and actually fight for this.
Thank you.
I could chime in next.
Please do, Carla.
For me, I guess it was stepping up more, learning more, experiencing like through the BLM protests or activism. It really brought everything to light, and it opened everyone's eyes to everything, and which is I'm grateful to, because for some of us Native American community, it just kind of made us realize that we still are forgotten. And that, and I will bring it up, is now, I'm grateful as of this past week, the Denver City and County did an acknowledgement that they were going to acknowledge the original land owners here in Colorado and Denver, and that's the Cheyenne Arapahoes, and acknowledge that massacre. And so for us, it's being acknowledged as the first Native American peoples here. And so we still have to fight for that. We still have to voice our opinion, because, we are stereotyped. We're stereotyped with our names, like my name. People don't think I'm a real person because of my name. But that's actually my grandfather. That's his name. His name is Chief Fears Nothing, Respects Nothing. So, it's things like that people stereotype us with our last names, but those are our ancestors' family names. So things like that. And, just to keep vocal and continue doing outreach to the people out there where them doors were closed and they're still closed due to the pandemic, because there's no one out there that's going to help them in regards to homelessness unless you go out there and walk the walk.
Yeah. Thank you, Carla. Thomas or Caitlin, if you want to chime in, feel free to.
Yeah. So I think for us, first off, with regards to the pandemic, it's, highlighted some of the work that we're doing, like with paid family and medical leave, why we need sick days, policies like that, when we're facing a global health crisis. But, with the protests, I think we've always tried to want to center racial justice, but this seemed to really bring into light, how can we be explicitly anti-racist in the day-to-day structures and operation of our work, and really live that. At 9 to 5, we have a lot of Black staff. So, when the protests, first really, during the height of it, our executive director ended up giving us a week off, because although we're organizers, we're 9 to 5 staff, we're whole human beings. And, we really value everyone on our team being able to care for themselves, and live whatever all of this means for them in their own lives.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge.
That's great.
Yeah.
I would just like to add, that change is on the horizon. It just made me aware of how powerful all our voices are together, and realized some of the inequities and some of the flaws that are in the system. And through, logical dialogue and innovation, I believe, we could come up with solutions that will work for everybody. And, being in these crossroads are hard, but getting those dialogue and getting these hard issues spoken, are great steps.
Yeah. Thank you. I have a deep appreciation for anyone who really centers racial justice, because I think it is sometimes a difficult conversation to have. And indeed an uncomfortable one. And so I really appreciate you all being unapologetic about that. in the work in your pursuits. And so thank you for that. I have a question in the chat for Carla and for Thomas. It says, what are the most important needs you see in our homeless relatives? So I hope you can decipher that.
Say that again, sorry.
You got no problem. What are the most important needs you see in our homeless relatives?
Gathering data.
Data?
And knowing, having that communication again, when we're out doing the, the outreach and stuff, we're very verbal people. And so, us going out there and saying, hey, we're here, we don't have much, but we're thinking about you, we're praying about you, we're trying to figure out how best to offer, resources such as housing, basic needs, where to go for food, and then, where to go after this, people who are losing jobs, who are losing housing, where the savings are drying up, where they are needing, the resources like the food bank at the Indian Center or other organizations that we partner with. We're trying to do the best we can with what we have and, offering that with a traditional backbone and a spiritual side of who we are. I personally believe in our ways, and I pray every day that, that I will get through the day. But I'm also a man of science and data. So, I try to have that balance and, live in reality, but also be there and have the heart and the caring and the compassion to be there for our people, those who are in their homelands without a home.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'll ask another follow-up for you, Carla and Thomas, and I hope you don't mind that I might be giving you a bunch of questions, and I'm doing it intentionally because what I've heard from our Indigenous communities is exactly what you said, Carla, is that oftentimes our Indigenous communities feel forgotten about, that our Indigenous communities feel invisible to whatever is happening in our day-to-day lives. And so I just want to take a moment to just uplift you all in this moment. But also to talk about some ways in which we can support you. And one of the questions that came while you all were giving your presentation, I think, Carla, you may have mentioned this, that many of the folks that you serve didn't know about the pandemic in a timely manner. And so I wanted to know, one, if you can talk a bit more about that, and also if you can tell us how there might be opportunities in which we can support the folks that you serve and you all as well moving forward.
I just had a short little story. Some of the people in our community don't have access to regular media such as TVs or even radio, or even having a phone. Basic needs such as food and housing are sometimes the expenses that are out there. Mm-hmm. So, when a couple people went to the store and there was nothing there, they didn't know why. And then they seen, people acting weird, and then, they kind of asked somebody, what's going on? And, it was like, hey, we're in a pandemic, there's no food, what were they to do, and so, to bridge that gap, the Indian Center thought about, delivering food to people who are in that risky category, or letting people know, hey, we do have a food bank here. We do have socially distant things, you got to stay in your car, we will bring the food out to you, doing all that paperwork and stuff like that, offering solutions to problems that are coming up in everyday circumstances. Again, it's just a lot of things. Carla is out there also. I know she can elaborate on some of the things that she has been working hard towards, including her circle.
Yeah, please do, Carla.
Okay, well, through the library, and I know we have Native American services at CCH with Kevin Raleigh and Teresa Burney. So we have talking circles for years, I'd say about maybe 15 or so years. We had a talking circle through CCH in the Denver community. But when I started at the library, they allowed me to continue that as well. So for now, we're doing it in the park, just the minimum amount of people, but just trying to connect them to services. We're not service providers, so we're just trying to help them connect with what connections we have. And again, I like to say I'm on board of directors of Metro Denver Housing Initiative. So with that connection there, that really helps a lot. And just the forgotten pieces, a lot of them don't have that media or that connection. So they didn't know how to use PPE, and they didn't know how to take care of themselves through PPE. And that's people in general on the street when the pandemic first started.
Yeah, thank you for that information. Going back to this feeling of being invisible. I think you speak to that, and we think about how communities receive information and the barriers that often exist in providing that mainstream communication. So I appreciate that. So I'll ask another question from the audience because I appreciate these questions. The question is, how are different abled impacted? And specifically for you, Jonathan, I hope you're ready for this. There weren't numbers for home ownership. Do you have any idea about that?
The differently abled people's home ownership levels?
Yep, and how are they impacted?
Yeah, it's a great question. I do not know.
Okay, that's okay. Maybe we can get to it. Maybe we can get back to it at some point.
Yeah, no, that's something I would like to look into for sure. I mean, there's obviously issues with access to rental buildings in particular, but there can often be design issues in home ownership, in for sale homes as well, that could automatically screen people from homes that might otherwise be affordable to them, like old homes, that would need a lot of redesign in order to give them access. So that's how I'm immediately thinking about it. Yeah, but I'm happy to think about that more and get you some thoughts that you could send out to whoever asked that question.
Beautiful. I'll accept that. Thank you so much. So this is a question that actually can go to any of the folks on this panel. Someone's curious, what are your thoughts? What your thoughts are about short-term solutions for unhoused Denver residents, and maybe we can expand that as well, especially when we are seeing current sweeps impacting unhoused residents. Wonderful question. Don't be shy now.
I mean, I'll take a start at it.
Please.
I mean, just generally speaking to the part of being short term, I think there has to be like a balance. We need to address like the immediate needs of folks, but we're going to keep having immediate needs unless we really address like the structure and the reason behind it. So that's where my passion lies personally, is like really creating that systemic change.
Yeah, thank you.
I would say outreach. Start from outreach and find where they're at, because how can you help them in the long term when you can't figure out what's happening right now, where they're at.
Yes, having those solutions there, having that input, and then again, finding those solutions from that input, that's so crucial. Again, like I said, Native Americans don't have a lot of trust in government systems.
Mm-hmm.
So we try to bridge that trust, saying, hey, we're here, even though, you're outside of what is familiar, such as reservation native lands, there is a way to survive here, and this is how you go about it. So again, just the outreach and, having that communication, the input, so we could continue on and think about great solutions.
Yeah. So in that same vein, there's another question here in that same vein about short-term solutions. I know there's been a lot of discussion about safe outdoor spaces, and one of the questions asked about NIMBYism and how we can combat a strong emotion like NIMBYism to be able to reach some of those both short and long-term solutions. And so I'm curious as to how you all if you've had to come up against NIMBYism, and how you all have been able to navigate that. And bless you if you haven't.
I mean,
go ahead, Jonathan. It's all on you.
NIMBYism is really tough. I think I saw that question fly by, yeah, it's difficult. It's something that so many communities are struggling with everywhere. What's the best? What was the best solution? Was that the question? What's the best ways of addressing it, basically, right?
Yes.
Yeah, is the way. So I've and other people who work in housing on the call have probably been to a number of city council meetings where there's like an avowed like NIMBY section and an avowed not NIMBY section, and they seem pretty entrenched. But it seems like the arguments that work the best is to say, when you say not in my backyard, you're not saying that just to a building, like brick and mortar, you're saying that to people. And those are people that in a slightly different scenario could be your kids who can't afford a home yet, are the people that you hire, that you see in restaurants. Probably the best connection is just literally, it's this type of housing that your kids need. And making that connection is really important. There's also a lot of data out there that has pretty well debunked the idea that affordable housing in particular being put up in middle to higher income communities tanks the land values. That's one of their main concerns, right? Is it tanks the land value, and most of the evidence does not bear that out. So finding those studies and saying, A, your land value is not going down, B, this is not delinquents. These are people that in your life that could benefit from stuff like this. And you probably have someone in your life, at least one person who's been on the edge of homelessness or something, and at some point. So just making it personal, I guess, and moving away from the building aspect of it, I feel like has been useful, but it is still, really hard.
Yeah, thank you. Caitlin, I'd love to hear from you, as you've done a lot of policy work, and I don't imagine that you all push forward policy changes that everyone is essentially excited about. And so I'd love to hear about some of the work you do and how you're able to move through some of that opposition.
Sorry, I just had a dog in the background.
It's all good.
Yeah, I mean, I think, because it is like dehumanizing this sentiment. And, for us at like 9 to 5, we do really value that like lived experience. So a lot of like our organizing work is like storytelling and elevating folks who are actually going through the issue so that they can explain it in their own words. And, I think that's something that, brings empathy. It also brings like expertise to the issue.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And it sounds, at least from what you and Jonathan has shared, is the storytelling is incredibly important if you want to be able to push anything forward, because we're not just talking about numbers, right? We're not just talking about methodologies. We're talking about the impacts of policies, of decisions, of processes on the day-to-day lives of individuals. And those individuals can be, maybe not today, but maybe in the near future, your cousins and even your parents. And so I think it does change or shape the conversation in a different direction. So I appreciate that. I try and use that as often as possible. I'm not always good at it when I get, a little hot-headed because these issues are personal, right? So I have one more question for you, Carla and Thomas. It's coming from the folks on this panel. And then I have some questions that we have pre-prepared as well if we don't have some things coming in. So we hope not to put you on the spot with this question. If you don't have the answer for it, don't you worry about it. You can send it to me later. But I did want to honor that it is in the chat. Can either of you talk a bit about the Indian relocation in the 20th century and how those policies are related to American Indian health and economic disparities now? Denver was a relocation city, and that is part of the story of Native homelessness here now. And I'll have Kevin chime in if he for asking.
Well, that's a great background. The Denver Indian Center arose from the 1950s relocation program. Denver was one of the pilot cities that they thought, that Native Americans would thrive in. Some background of that program was to take people from their native lands, reservation lands, to bring them to big urban centers, give them housing, give them training in trades, and see, if they were able to assimilate or adapt. It was not a good program. There was not a good number of successes. Most of the people went back to the native lands, and a few people stayed. The few people and families that did stay in Denver felt that there was a need to congregate and have a safe space for to do religious things such as powwows, practice ceremonies, and just learn about our traditional ways. So out of that, a couple of organizations came together, and the Denver Indian Center was born. A couple reiterations, and we moved to our current location. And, we're continuing with that spirit of, continuing on in any kind of situation. I am actually a product of the Denver Indian Center, you can say. I went to Head Start there. I also got my first job there when I was 15. And I also continued on throughout life. And the Indian Center was an integral part of my life. It helped me develop that traditional side. I had a safe space that I could go to powwows. I could learn traditional things such as beadwork, foodstuffs, and just various things that, that weren't available to me in other avenues such as school, library, or just, with my other peers. So, having that center, having that place where we could congregate and feel safe to be who we are is, what the Denver Indian Center is about. By also, offering, that hand up, with resources with our workforce, our fatherhood program. That's just another part of our program that we have there. We're also reaching out, thinking how we're going to be there for our elders and then the youth coming up too. We had a reading program over the summer. So that was great, to help some of the people who are kind of, stuck inside, make sure that reading is fun, but also have, other kind of plans and activities for the youth that were going on this summer. So, thinking like that and outside the box is some of the things that we try to do at the Indian Center, but also still keeping that connection back to home. Like Carla likes to elaborate on all the things that are at home, the families, our ways, and, some of the things that we can't get in the city still exist, in our native lands. And Carla was telling me a story yesterday, and I said, you should share that story about home. So, I'm sure Carla can add to that.
Go ahead, Carla.
Well, again, too, with the relocation, we had, the families that are still here and their children are still here. I know quite a few of them that still that do things in the community, and thankful to some of the like Aurora, I believe it was Aurora Community College, Boulder County, Parks and Rec. They're slowly offering to give land back to the Native communities that were here. And they're reaching out to organizations and even just to be caretakers of this open land that once was a path of tribal nations to go from north to south. I came here with my aunt and them were here already with the relocation program. And so a lot of us that were born and raised on our reservations don't, because it's a, third world country back there, we moved up here for a better way of life. And we bring our culture and our heritage and our language that our tribes still have. And we try to bring it to the community and share that in hopes to keep it going. and just to share that and just keep our traditional spirituality alive. And so with that Relocation Act, and also at a time, the Denver community had a treatment center that brought people from all over the country. It was called Eagle Lodge. And that place had brought in, you know, everyone, a lot of people came here to get sober. And that's how also they found out about the Denver community. And some stayed, some didn't. So yeah, that's kind of where that is. And, you know, just we have our own internal Indian Health Service, and we do have a Indian Health Service clinic that is funded by the government. So we also still, that's who we're seeing some of our healthcare through.
Thomas, did you want to add anything before I chimed in? No.
No, that's just, I mean, there's so many things that, you know, are in our community. And again, you know, we try to be that contemporary place for Native peoples, whether they come from Native lands or whether they come down from down the street westward. You know, we try to be that place for Native peoples, again, while keeping that traditional and the history alive with language, elders, and powwows.
If I may ask a follow-up, because you both, Thomas and Carla, have touched on this a bit, with the ritual and your culture and the powwows, and how the pandemic has really interrupted the ability of Native communities, Indigenous communities to be able to participate in those things that are incredibly important to you all. And so I'm just curious of what the impact has been and how you all have navigated that change.
It's hard seeing our people pass away at what is not record numbers to other people. But when you're talking about tribes who have like less than 1,000 members in them, and you know they're starting to lose, you know, 100, 200 people. Most of those people are the elders, and they have, you know, the knowledge and you know, some of the things that that we are about, you know. So at the Indian Center, again, you know, we're trying to emphasize, you know, wearing masks, being socially distant, keeping yourself safe, washing your hands, collaborating with groups to make PSAs about this very, very issue. And just, you know, letting Native peoples know that, you know, we are a very vulnerable group. Mm-hmm. And again, you know, like we said, like I said before, this is not our first pandemic, you know. It was used against us in the history of the United States, the founding of it, you know. So we are well aware of that. And again, we try to have that strength in ourselves, in our tradition, in our ways, but also in science. And, you know, if they're telling us to wear a mask, you know, and it may be good, then you might as well wear a mask. And, you know, just washing your hands, you know, is good, good science, and just, you know, a way to keep the germs down. So, you know, spreading those kind of facts out there to our community and letting them decide. And also, you know, letting them know that, you know, we're there for the elders, and, you know, this is serious. So we try to be that informational and hub for our community at the Denver Indian Center.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. Carla, anything for you?
Just keeping, same thing. You know, same thing with Thomas. We just try to keep our, you know, culture still going. I know a lot of it's going through social media, and, you know, teaching our elders how to get on Zoom meetings and, you know, find, you know, still connect with our culture. You know, I decided to have a talking circle base group out there, and it's with everyone throughout the United States. So I was hoping to try to connect people on there. But just keeping that hope alive, and just keep that communication open. And also, and the next month is Native American Heritage Month. And, you know, I'm grateful for being at the library, because we're going to have a whole month or two to honor the Native American heritage culture, and with all kinds of programming at the library. So we're filling that up and honoring them, people and the ancestors of the Sand Creek Massacre and Wounded Knee Massacre. And we also want to keep it local and honor the people that were here and honor their tribes and their nations here.
Beautiful. You said next month, so November?
Yep.
And December? Beautiful. Thank you. And then Carla, you mentioned hope. And one of the questions in the chat is actually about hope. And so I'm curious for all four of you, what makes you all hopeful?
Groups like this and dialogue.
Say that again.
Groups like this and dialogue gives me hope that, there's change, and, having these hard discussions and, tackling these topics is what is needed in order to get where we're going.
Yeah.
I think the theme of invisibility that Thomas and Carla were talking about resonates. There's a lot more visibility. It's just interesting. I think this was a really sobering conversation for me to hear about and listen in on, to hear you and Thomas and Carlos talk, just because, I think probably the greatest sort of trick of systemic racism was not just making Black and brown lives invisible from a majority minority perspective, but also invisible to each other as well. Can't do that anymore. And if anything, there's a positive trend in visibility, both inner dialogue and as a country. So I guess that gives me hope.
Yeah, thank you. You're absolutely right, Jonathan. Those numbers are sobering, right? To say 1,000 folks and to lose 200 from one community, that oh my goodness, right? Caitlin, Carla, please feel free to chime in. What gives you hope?
Yeah, I think for me, relationships, working closely and building from that makes me hopeful.
Thank you. And Carla?
For me, I guess it's just seeing the strength and the resilience of, everyone out here still, making it to another day and being positive, just kind of connecting with each other and checking on each other. And, for us at the library, we really kind of stepped up in ways that we never thought we could, because we're just a library. But, we got outreach teams and bookmobiles going on, and, we go do outreach 3 times a week just to make sure people have hygiene kits and basic needs and socks and water. So, just things like that, and seeing the people out there that, that they're still hopeful and hanging in there for another day and through prayer.
Yeah. Carla, can you talk a bit about how you have seen homelessness impact Black, Indigenous, and people of color through the work that you do at the library?
I know there's a lot of, I see a lot of negativity, but, it's just, for them, we have computer and laptops outside, and to see them walk up and use them, or to see them come back over and know that, there's a place they can go to just to go, be heard and be seen. And just no matter it, and it don't matter what color you are right now, it's just being heard and being seen. I know there are a lot of issues and people have their own agendas regarding Black Lives Matter and all the protests. I mean, right now we're even worried about the celebration or the riots that's going to happen after the elections. Yeah. So we're worried about what's going to happen around the libraries in regards to what's going to happen there. And that really sets off a lot of PTSD as well. So, it's just a lot of factors, but, I just don't really see color. I know we're what we talked about it, but, in my eyes and what my relatives back home and my elders had taught me that, no one is better than no one else. And just to humble yourself and respect each other.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So I'll pose this question to the entire panel. as we talk about the challenges during this pandemic, specifically the challenges for BIPOC folks in Colorado. What do you think, or what have you seen in the work that you've done to be the most challenging issue impacting BIPOC folks, Black, Indigenous, and people of color in Colorado today? Maybe it's not one. We talked about dueling and twin pandemics, so there's that.
Yeah, and I think too, this pandemic really opened everyone's eyes where, you know, we all fall. We all lose our jobs. We all get sick. We're all stuck in that hospital with COVID. You know, it doesn't see a color.
Thank you.
I think, I mean, yeah, that's like a huge thing. You know, definitely chatted with my coworkers about this, and we think it's, you know, implicit racism. Like, one, we're seeing this with just how the like pandemic is playing out, like disparities in health and economic consequences. But, you know, also like implicit racism is very deep, even in the like progressive movement.
Yeah.
We still see this. It can push, you know, BIPOC leaders out. And yeah, not, you know, we need to address things. We can't be like race neutral on any solution, because that's just creating additional structural racism.
Right. And neutrality is a position, whether we want to acknowledge that or not. Jonathan, or Thomas, either of you.
Sure. So, yeah, I think that one of the biggest issues is just that within our world, within affordable housing, whether we're talking about you know, housing for people experiencing homelessness, or getting, you know, a lower income family that can't find an apartment anywhere because they have so many kids, you know, into like into a home, which would have been the traditional step, right? Like a house with many rooms, instead of you know, spending that much in monthly payments for a 1 or 2 bedroom. So, you know, that's big issue. But, you know, affordable housing occupies something like 10%, less than that. I think it's like 9.5% of the market in Denver. So most units are not controlled by nonprofits, obviously. And so the type of implicit racism that Caitlin was talking about is really outside of our control. So, well, not totally. I mean, there's policy we can do, but we have a lot to do there. But I was trying to pull up some data that was more recent, and I couldn't find any, but the Metro Fair Housing Center did a study back in 2014, where they went around and tried to figure out, they do these things, they have these double blind, or not double blind, but these studies where they'll send in a white person with a certain credit score and an income into an apartment to go and see like what their treatment is like. And then a Black person with the exact same stats, a Latinx person, someone with kids, not with kids, et cetera. And so at the time, for 67% of white testers were treated more favorably than African-American testers. So no white testers were asked to provide ID, for instance. They were often little fees and things were waived, stuff like that. 73% of Latinx, 73% of families with children, or, you know, people with children, were treated unfavorably. And that tells you a lot about the types of apartments and the type of, you know, residents they're trying to curate for their, whatever bougie look they're going for.
Right.
And then 91% of the time, white testers were treated more fairly than Latinx testers. And so, you know, there's law, there's fair housing law, there's all this stuff that's out there, but the implicit bias and maybe explicit bias kind of just pervades and makes it really difficult to make strides. Again, this year I think has brought a lot to light, and there's a lot of people becoming more aware of their implicit bias. So not saying that totally disparaging, there is no hope, you know, we're all talking about it now, but that's one of the biggest challenges is how the market treats low income and BIPOC populations because they're the majority of the time. That's who you're interacting with is, as a for-profit developer.
Yeah. Thank you, Jonathan. Take it away, Thomas.
I would just like to add, having these dialogue, having this conversation, not only, to the majority, but also, with other organizations, and just letting, other organizations know that we are similar, and we also have, similar goals.
Thank you. I have 3 more questions. I want to make sure I'm honoring you all's time, as I appreciate that you all have tuned in. We are in Colorado, and this would not be a panel if we didn't talk about cannabis, right? And so we're completely switching gears here. And the next question here comes from Don. And the question is the Marijuana Enforcement Division helping with housing as the cannabis industry drove up housing costs in Colorado? And so I don't know who might be able to take this, and it's okay if no one, but Jonathan, you're shaking your head, so you might have something to add here. Sorry to pick on you.
No, that's all right. So I don't know as much as I would like to know about this, actually, but yes, it's true that investment from the cannabis industry has done a lot of things. It's driven up land values when like what used to be sort of lower value warehouses suddenly became grow stations, and all of a sudden it went from not very much a square foot to like 80 or like 100 a square foot, and that drives land values up, and it usually happens in places like Globeville and others. And so there's all these things going on that have this pretty big effect on housing. So that's all true. Are they doing anything? Well, they are doing some things. Someone noted in there that there's a $15 or $16 million transfer from marijuana, I guess it's sales tax that goes to housing at the state level. So that's great. I mean, that doubles what. So if it wasn't for that, this year we would have gotten just $7.5 million at the state level for affordable housing through a fee called the vendor fee. It's a different bill. So that 15 million, right, is more than twice what, or 60 million than what we were normally getting. So it's not a drop in the bucket, but it is from their perspective, certainly, right? And since the need is so high, that it would be great if they contributed more. I was pleasantly surprised by the marijuana industry in, I think it was 2018 when, or maybe it was 19, when the city of Denver passed that increased sales tax on the marijuana industry, and that went into Denver's affordable housing fund. We all expected a lot of protests, from that department, but we actually had some repertory come and testify and say, you know what, we want to be part of this community, and so go ahead and tax us. We're like, oh, it's the first time I've ever seen an industry volunteer to be taxed, right? So can't knock them too much there. Now, as far as how much damage they're doing versus how much money they're contributing, or if there's other strategic things they can do to, not just like, oh, well, here's a fee for all the bad that we're doing to the state when we're specifically impacting this neighborhood, right? There are more direct things they probably could be doing to offset the negative impacts that result in gentrification and displacement. So more to do there, but they're not doing nothing is my answer.
Thank you, Jonathan. And Don, I know you have a lot that you'd like to add to this conversation, and I wish we had the time to do it, but if you could put your contact information in the chat, I would love for folks to be able to contact you to learn more about cannabis and how we might learn more about it. So thank you so much, sis. Really appreciate you. I am going to wrap us up. I have one more question for you all because I want to make sure that we are not just having a conversation, but we are figuring out what some solution and some action steps are. And so if you 4 panelists can just give us one concrete action that you think can be accomplished in your field to address systemic racism and oppression. This is not a heavy question at all, so don't you worry about it. So please be specific and name whether this action is already underway and how you would start it. And also let the folks know on this panel how they might be able to support you in the work you do, because we really do need to be leaning on each other to get some of this stuff done. So take it away, whoever thinks quickly. I don't, I would go last.
Well, it's a good thing that we prepped for this question.
There you go. I wasn't going to tell anyone. I was going to just let them think you were quick on your feet. I had your back.
But again, we just want people to know visibility, some of the issues and barriers that we are facing out there. Again, we do have other organizations helping with, the water and the sanitizers, but, we also need, like the Cliff Bars, gloves, mittens, all those kind of cold winter gear kind of stuff out there so we can help out with the community. And then also having the data collection, where do we need to go at certain times because the community is so mobile and just different places. So having good communication, good logistics of where we can best help and offer these resources to our community so we show that, we're there for them also, I think would be great. And us, me and Carla going out there now are laying the foundation for doing that. Again, we want people to know, hey, we're out here, even if, things are closing, we're still here to lend that hand and be there for you.
Thank you so much, Thomas.
Sorry.
Okay.
Carla.
Okay, I'm all looking at her. For me, same thing along the lines of that, because the street outreach and more communication would be great because, our most disparate is out there, the population, we've lost a lot and we're going backwards again. So, just a lot of, outreach and building relationships again with our people out there and that who feel unheard.
Thank you so much, Carla. Caitlin.
Yeah. So just for some concrete things, I'm going to plug Proposition 118 again. If you haven't already voted, please vote yes on it. If you have already voted, please talk to your folks who still need to turn in their ballots and urge them to vote yes. And then I guess I'm going to add 2 concrete things. Donate to BIPOC-led organizations because they get 10 times less funding than white-led organizations, and that inhibits ability to build power.
There you go.
Thank you.
Jonathan, don't disappoint us.
Oh boy. I would say that the housing first model is pretty powerful, and it needs to become as mainstream as possible and move out of the pilot mode into just the default mode. So we have the social impact bond that CCH has implemented in Mental Health Center of Denver, where take formerly homeless and house them. And then, there's all these positive benefits like we were talking about in terms of like not, going back to prison and just positive life outcomes. And it's been successful. Kathy might text me later and give me an update on it, but I'm pretty sure it's referred to as a pilot. Like, why is it not just the thing that we do? It's been tried across, lots of other states and cities really successfully. So in general, this idea of housing first as a model to address homelessness, as a economic empowerment model to address BIPOC populations, as sort of the baseline thing you do to then build off of for financial empowerment. Otherwise it's just so it's at the base of so many things. Why is it not an indicator, for if you look at folks who are, having interactions with the criminal justice system, et cetera, it's like, okay, well, one way we can, reduce crime in this city is to house everyone. Said no one ever, right, at the public level. And so it really just needs to become front and center. And as far as what we can do or what folks on the call can do, I know it sounds a little kitschy, but the murder of George Floyd and of lots of other people over the course of the last few years, all of a sudden created this fulcrum where, so the bill that was passed by Leslie Herod, or was proposed by Leslie Herod, that got rid of chokes. The police couldn't do chokes anymore. You can't indiscriminately fire rubber bullets at a crowd. and you can't aim at people's faces anymore. Things that should have been obvious. That bill had already existed in a pretty similar form before George Floyd, and it didn't have a prayer of passing. And all of a sudden this movement happened, and all of a sudden that same bill was just reorganized a little bit, and then it was nearly unanimous and bipartisan.
Yeah.
Right. So someone asked in the chat, they were like, "Oh, I got this letter about privately about the group living ordinance. Should I be telling my city council person that that's something that I support?" The flyer that I got was against it, and it's like, yes. And the more you can build an actual sort of the more evidence you can give people in power that there's popular support behind radical ideas, the less radical they become, in short. So we need support there. We don't want to, as advocates, don't want to go and sound totally insane and crazy every time we come up with pretty common sense ideas. But if we have to support everyone else, then it becomes easier.
The whole dissertation there, Jonathan, and I appreciate you for it. That's right. Well, I appreciate you all. I know we are over time. I will conclude. I will make this quick, I promise. I know many of you were expecting the Colorado Criminal Justice Reform Coalition. They had some things come up at the last minute, and we're so sorry that they weren't able to attend CCJRC. Meredith will send out in an email tomorrow the Homeless to Jail report from the Urban Institute. And so you all can take a look at that. I think Carla and Thomas both talked about the need for supplies. There's this tagline that we show up for each other. We're all in this together. And there's an easy way in which we can do that in our day-to-day lives. It's pick up something extra and get it to Thomas and Carla when you're at the grocery store. If those are bars or snacks or whatever it is, and truly embody this, we are all in this together. Connect with Dawn because she knows about the cannabis industry and she's really interested and excited to teach you it. And then finally, Angela, your baby boy was in the screen and he is so cute. I just love him so much. So keep it up, parenting, that little cute guy in the background. That is it. I hope you all do something that just brings you so much joy because you deserve it. And we are absolutely in a global pandemic. You all have a wonderful night and thank you so much for attending because you could have been anywhere in the world, but you were here with us today. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you.